Berlin, January 1945. Beneath the reinforced concrete ceilings of the Oberkommando der Wehrmacht headquarters, in a room that smells of paper, tobacco, and cold steel radiators, a single file rests open under a shaded lamp. The red stamp across its cover reads Streng Geheim, top secret. Inside are reconnaissance photographs, intercepted radio transcripts, prisoner interrogations, tactical maps marked in grease pencil, and pages of dense analysis typed in careful military German. At the top of the first page is a name that has appeared again and again in situation reports from France to the German border: George S. Patton Jr. This is not a biography. It is not a courtesy profile. It is an attempt to solve a problem. The problem is that this American general does not behave the way generals are supposed to behave, and the German High Command, an institution built on order, doctrine, and predictability, is trying to decide whether he is reckless, unstable, and lucky, or something far more dangerous. By early 1945, Germany is fighting a war it can no longer win. The Red Army is driving in from the east. The Western Allies have crossed into the Reich. Cities burn nightly under Allied bombing. Every decision now carries existential weight. Intelligence, once a tool for expansion, has become an instrument of survival. Within the branch known as Fremdheer West, responsible for analyzing Western Allied forces, officers have spent months building detailed assessments of every significant commander. They have files on Eisenhower, whom they consider cautious and politically minded; on Montgomery, methodical and slow to move without overwhelming preparation; on Bradley, steady and dependable. And then there is Patton, impossible to categorize, difficult to anticipate, and increasingly impossible to ignore. The earliest entries in his file date back to North Africa in 1942. At first, the tone is dismissive. An American officer with cavalry roots, a veteran of the First World War, known for flamboyance. German commanders, fresh from early victories, do not regard the U.S. Army as a serious threat. The debacle at Kasserine Pass seems to confirm their assumptions. American units appear disorganized and inexperienced. But then Patton takes command of 2 corps. Within weeks, intelligence summaries note changes. American formations move with greater cohesion. Attacks are sharper, more coordinated. Discipline stiffens. The language in the reports shifts from mild contempt to cautious observation. Something has altered the American tempo. What confuses German analysts most is not just the improvement in performance, it is the man himself. Patton cultivates visibility. He wears polished helmets, carries ivory-handled revolvers, and moves close to the front. Generals are not meant to be theatrical. They are meant to be invisible architects of battle. Yet Patton seems to understand that war is not only about logistics and firepower, it is about morale, image, and momentum. German officers trained in the traditions of Moltke and Schlieffen find this puzzling. Is it vanity? Is it propaganda? Or is it deliberate psychological warfare? The file begins to include not only battlefield analysis but personality assessment. Sicily deepens the mystery. In July 1943, when Allied forces land on the island, German planners expect a grinding advance through difficult terrain. Instead, Patton's 7th Army surges forward with astonishing speed. He bypasses strongpoints, improvises supply, and races toward Messina in a bold maneuver that appears strategically unnecessary but operationally devastating. German field reports describe American units appearing where they are not expected, cutting off retreats before defenses can be reorganized. The word fanatisch appears in one assessment, not as praise, but as an attempt to describe relentless offensive spirit. Yet the more analysts attempt to frame his behavior as reckless, the harder it becomes to reconcile that label with the results. The file grows thicker. Intelligence officers gather transcripts of Patton's speeches to his troops. They study his language, blunt, profane, unapologetically violent. To German ears, it sounds crude, even barbaric. Yet they note something critical. His soldiers respond. Morale under his command appears unusually high. Prisoner interrogations confirm that American troops believe in him, fear disappointing him, and expect victory under his leadership. German analysts understand morale as a force multiplier. They have seen its effects on the Eastern Front. A commander who can transform belief into momentum becomes more than a tactician. He becomes an engine of operational speed. Then come the slapping incidents in Sicily. Reports filtered through Allied media reveal that Patton struck soldiers suffering from battle fatigue. German intelligence records this carefully. Here, perhaps, is instability, emotional volatility, evidence that the general's aggression borders on obsession. Some officers argue this proves he lacks balance and can be baited into error. Others counter that emotional intensity, however uncomfortable, may be inseparable from his operational daring. The file begins to reflect internal debate. Is Patton a liability contained by his superiors, or a weapon whose full potential has not yet been unleashed? By 1944, the debate becomes urgent. The Allies prepare to invade Western Europe. German intelligence knows an assault is coming but cannot determine where. When Patton is placed in command of the fictitious 1st U.S. Army Group in southeast England, the deception is almost too convincing. To German planners, it is inconceivable that the Allies would sideline their most aggressive commander during the main invasion. Therefore, wherever Patton waits must be the decisive point. Even after the Normandy landings begin, German reserves remain positioned near Calais, anticipating a second, larger blow under Patton's command. The file records this as confirmation of his strategic value. His reputation alone has influenced German deployment decisions. When Patton finally enters combat in France in August 1944, the tone of the file changes permanently. The Third Army's breakout from Normandy becomes one of the fastest operational advances in modern warfare. German units retreat in disarray. Defensive lines collapse before they solidify. American spearheads advance dozens of miles in days. Intelligence summaries describe an enemy who refuses to pause, who exploits every opening, who transforms tactical success into operational breakthrough before countermeasures can be organized. The word unstoppable appears, not to imply invincibility, but to capture the inability to impose delay. German doctrine emphasizes coordinated planning and logistical security. Patton appears to treat speed itself as a weapon. He scavenges fuel, bypasses resistance, and relies on subordinate initiative. Analysts struggle to reconcile this with their training. Warfare, in their understanding, is methodical. Yet here is an opponent who embraces calculated chaos and thrives within it. Some officers begin using the term Fingerspitzengefühl, an intuitive feel for battle that cannot be taught. It is a reluctant admission that Patton possesses something beyond textbook competence. Yet even this momentum reveals limits. By September 1944, supply shortages slow the Third Army. German intelligence notes that Patton's advance has outrun Allied logistics. Here, at last, appears vulnerability. But Germany lacks the strength to exploit it. The Wehrmacht is too depleted, too fragmented, to mount a decisive counterstroke. The irony is painful. Patton's speed has so thoroughly disorganized German forces that even his temporary halt offers no relief. In December 1944, as Germany launches its last major offensive in the Ardennes, the file predicts Patton's response with remarkable accuracy. Analysts expect that if a breakthrough occurs, he will pivot rapidly to counterattack. What they debate is timing. Weeks, perhaps. The logistical complexity should demand it. Instead, Patton reorients his army in mere days and strikes toward Bastogne, fulfilling the most aggressive projections in the file. German officers reading situation reports in late December must recognize the pattern. Prediction does not equal prevention. Understanding his nature has not provided the means to counter it. By January 1945, as the Third Army pushes into Germany itself, the file's purpose shifts. It no longer seeks solutions, It records inevitabilities. Patton's forces cross rivers, seize towns, and advance relentlessly eastward. The language is stripped of earlier speculation. There is no more debate about whether he is reckless or brilliant. He is categorized as a primary operational threat whose methods are well understood, but whose impact cannot be neutralized given Germany's collapsing resources. And yet, perhaps the most striking element of the file is what it reveals about perception. Patton knows he is being watched. He cultivates image deliberately. Distinctive uniforms, bold statements, conspicuous leadership, these are not accidents. He understands that fear travels faster than tanks. If German soldiers believe they face his army, their resolve may falter before contact. In this sense, the intelligence file becomes part of the battlefield itself. The more German officers analyze him, the more his reputation grows. There is something haunting about this exchange. In war, enemies study each other not out of curiosity, but out of necessity. They dissect speeches, map movements, and debate psychology. In doing so, they construct a version of the opponent that may never fully match reality. The Patton who exists in German files is part fact, part interpretation, part projection of anxiety. But perception shapes action. German expectations influence deployments, defensive plans, and strategic priorities. In that way, the man on the battlefield and the man in the file become intertwined. As the Third Army drives deeper into the Reich, liberating camps and capturing prisoners by the hundreds of thousands, the file closes not with triumph or revelation but with resignation. Knowledge has limits. Intelligence can clarify strengths and weaknesses, but it cannot compensate for collapsing infrastructure, dwindling fuel, and shattered divisions. By the time Berlin itself trembles under artillery fire, the assessments of George S. Patton Jr. have become historical record rather than operational guidance. The war will end. The concrete headquarters will fall silent. The file, stamped and signed, will be captured and archived. Historians will read its pages and see not only analysis of an American general, but the psychology of a losing command struggling to understand why doctrine failed to contain momentum. They will see debates over recklessness versus genius, instability versus intuition. And perhaps they will recognize the deeper truth embedded in those pages, that warfare is not governed solely by systems and supply tables. It is shaped by personalities, by belief, by speed, and by the willingness to act faster than an opponent can adapt. In the end, Patton was neither myth nor madman. He was a commander whose aggression aligned perfectly with the strategic moment. Germany, stretched beyond endurance, could not absorb the shock of relentless offense. The intelligence file attempted to reduce him to variables and probabilities. But some elements of command resist neat categorization. Momentum, reputation, instinct, these exist in the margins between doctrine and decision. And so the final pages of that file, written in a city awaiting its own reckoning, stand as testament to a realization that came too late. The enemy had been understood. His patterns were mapped. His psychology debated. Yet he could not be slowed. The analysis was thorough. The conclusions were accurate. The outcome was unchanged.